lovely day!
Welcome to Flat Earth Debate, Uncut and After Show. I'm your host Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification icon to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you'd like to join the community debate, then go to nathanoakley.com and check out the Flat Earth Debate forum. If you'd like to support this channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they premiere. There's also a PayPal, Patreon and crypto link in the info box below the video. Now, we're currently in the interim stages between two debates, so I will pass over to the panel and you can enjoy the dulcet tones of whoever is in there while I set up for the next live show.
I'm hanging upside down off a tree because I do use that.
Yes, that's what it was, yes.
Or some other ridiculous explanation. That was what he said. So he's trying to use the tone in his voice, the inflection in his voice, to make it into a weak argument. But it doesn't change the fact that if I'm upside down on a tree looking at you and you're pointing to the sky, you're actually pointing down to me. Now, that is the point. It's because it's the human that's involved. If the human's not involved, then there is no directions, unless maybe magnetic north.
And I don't think that's the part that they get, Riley. I think that's
the thing is, it does two things. The first thing it does is takes away from the Musa point, which is an absolute ball killer. They need gravity, right? They can't have it. But the other thing it does is to argue that it's only the thing is Einstein's theory of relativity, when it comes to space, is complete sci-fi fiction bullshit nonsense. But the relativity is a thing. We do experience relativity. Bob demonstrated it when he said, if you're standing in front of me and I put my left arm out and you put your left arm out, we're not putting the same arm out. That is relativity. So Einstein's relativity is a thing. It's just when it goes beyond the boundaries of what we call Earth and it starts becoming hocus pocus bullshit nonsense. But that doesn't mean that relativity is dead.
Right, but they're trying to describe down as relative, as the direction earthwards, right? So wouldn't that be relative to Earth would be down, and relative to the sky, the clouds above my head, that would be up, right? But it's still relative.
It is, because the humans put in the direction to it.
Right.
If I was Jerem yesterday and Bob asked me what the bearing ball would do when I let it go in the middle of the space or whatever, I would say it would go to my feet, right? And he probably would say like, no, it wouldn't. And in that moment, I would ask him, explain why.
The thing is, Nathan wouldn't allow that element of Narnia conjecture. Now that I'd say, look, why would you argue about something that we have no idea what really is up there? You can't argue it hypothetically, unless you admit it is hypothetical and it proves fuck all.
Yeah, he did kind of lose me with the space.
Yeah, me too.
Space example, but I was more interested. Yeah, I was more interested though in the vomit comet example.
If you watch that clip back carefully, that tower that he's got collapses because he jolts backwards, accidentally or otherwise. He jolts backwards and jerks the bottle. If he didn't do that, I don't know what would have happened. But he did do that, and that is the cause of the collapse. So I think
but then one of the times he did it himself. He shook the thing himself.
Yeah.
He watched it mixed, and obviously it didn't separate again, and so they hit the bottom of their parabola, or whatever.
Well,
right?
there's somebody in the Discord who's challenging relative density, and you should go in there sometime, Sleeping Warrior, and talk to him about that. His name's Woz. He's a reasonable guy. It'd be worth your time, probably 20 minutes.
Woz is a fucking idiot. You can't have a conversation because half the time he's drunk. The other half, he doesn't make coherent sense. I would rather talk to the wall and watch paint dry instead.
Hey, Anthony.
Yo.
In a spray can of paint, which is pressurized, left on your garage shelf for 2 years, when you pick it up, the pressurized elements within the can, if you read the instructions, what does it say?
Shake well before use.
Oh, I wonder why we have to shake well. And
It's
what
the same with
propels it?
deodorant. You never put deodorant on without giving it a good shake, even if it's only been there 24 hours, right?
Yes, but let me finish. What do they have in the can that makes noise?
The ball
When you
bearing.
Yeah, why do they have that in there, Anthony?
Probably to settle through the sediment at the bottom.
Right. So because of
mix
density
it.
of the density of the materials in the can have found equilibrium because they sat on the shelf for 2 years.
Mhm.
In order for it to have what you want to work properly, you have to shake it up and mix it all. Mix it all.
Yeah.
It's a mixture, just like our what? Just like our
Atmosphere.
container, atmosphere with a dynamic system that shakes it all.
Yeah.
Oh, there
It's
there
the
was
same
another
thing.
problem.
It's
But
right in
somehow we
front
keep
of
hearing
our
there
eyes.
can't be a. Somehow we keep hearing there can't be some type of a gradient in a container, right?
But there
Well,
is, there obviously is.
Yeah, there can.
It's obviously a
Of
gradient
course they
in the
can, but we keep hearing that it can't be.
well,
The other
yeah,
And that's
exactly,
their argument,
chocolate.
right? Well,
That's
how do we have a pressure gradient in the? How do we have a pressure gradient in the atmosphere if we're in a container?
Just referring to Blue Marble's gas pressure without a container video, it's the best video to demonstrate that ever, because it doesn't do what he says it does. It does exactly what they say it can't.
why do you have a gradient in the can before you shake it?
The other problem, it was the example of the airplane where they mix the liquids, and
Yeah.
they were on free falling. First of all, I don't think that was enough time to let the liquids find their own arrangement, because they were on a free fall. And if you see it, they, what is it, like 5 seconds? The time that they show it's on free fall
Mhm.
or zero gravity. That's not
Yeah.
enough time to let the liquids find their equilibrium.
That is true, but there's two bigger points. The first point is when he presented the gravimeter and he showed all the bits, the numbers moving and stuff, and he's saying, well, what is this measuring? It's clear that is at the molecular level. Whatever that is at the molecular level. It's tiny. We can't detect it ourselves. Now, in the context of the zero G plane, if he's going to attribute that element of the gravimeter to the plane, the gravimeter is at the molecular level. We're not seeing at the molecular level. We're seeing at human levels. So the zero G plane, as it's called, is completely disproportionately exaggerated to the actual claim being made. So that's the first point. The second point is even if the gravimeter thing is showing somewhere, in the context of that plane falling, all them liquids are falling at the same rate as each other. They're free falling out the sky. The zero G plane's not the zero G area. We're in the zero G area. The zero G plane's falling out the sky. They're not even comparable, but for some reason they think that there is. The best way to deal with the zero G plane is say, listen, we're in the zero G environment. That plane is not.
Yeah, I didn't really get.
It would be the same as if you stand on a 3-story, like in a 3-floor building, and you mix the liquids and then you let them go. They're not gonna, they're not gonna arrange in that time because they're falling. Probably if you let it go from a far, like a more high altitude, the liquids are gonna arrange, but the other way, because now the how you say.
Well, it's too, like you said, it's too busy falling. It's not going to try to find its equilibrium while it's dealing with falling, right? It's wherever it reaches its end, wherever it falls to, then it'll start to settle out according to its density.
We're back to the example of the can of spray paint. You shake it up, it's all mixed, put it on the shelf, give it some time, everything will find its equilibrium due to its density.
Yep.
Oh, what a day! what a lovely day!
Welcome to Flat Earth Debate Live. I'm your host Nathan Oakley, and if you're new to this channel or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification icon to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you'd like to join the community debate, then go to nathanoakley.com, check out the Flat Earth Debate forum. If you'd like to support this channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they are live. There's also a PayPal, Patreon and crypto link in the info box below the video. Most importantly, if you'd like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the shape of the Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcome back on the next stream. Please also share the show on social media. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel, so please share the show. And one last time, if you're new to this channel or you've not done so already, how dare you, then be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification icon to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. Now we are joined by SX, Unusual, Sleeping Warrior, Anti-Flat Earth, Merle, Greg, Chocolate Sane, Arwin, and 10th Man. Very good to have you all.
Good afternoon.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks, Nathan.
Very good to have you all. Let's do a bit of housekeeping. Any signs of Earth curvature?
There is no
No.
curvature
That's
to
just
the Earth.
funny.
However, you could act as if there were one.
Nah, I'd rather live in the real world. There's no curvature.
Right, axial rotation. Signs of that?
Come on, Anthony.
Nope.
Cannot be shown. There's none.
Signs of an axis. Before we get axial rotation, is there signs of an axis on a ball that's tilted? No.
There is no axial rotation to the Earth. However, you could act as if there were one.
Any scientific evidence of gravity?
All assumptions.
Nope.
Nope.
Aberration.
Any evidence of the distance to the sun?
There is no measurable distance to the sun. However, you could act as if there were one.
Cannot be measured.
You don't know if there is no measurable distance to the sun, but there is no confirmed measured distance to the sun.
Or there is a distance to the sun.
Cannot be
But
done.
it's not literal. It's not literally the
No,
distance
it's
to the sun.
presupposed. But that's not, that's the thing about measuring.
Haven't made the
Right,
tape
there is,
measure yet.
there is none.
Any evidence that you can have gas pressure without the necessary antecedent of a container for all the fundies who believe the sky is a vacuum called outer space?
No.
Well, there may be an outer gas pressure, but only one way to find out.
Oh yeah? What's that?
Well, going up very, very high. Beyond anything. If that is even physically possible.
Okie dokie then. Any evidence of a self-perpetuating molten iron core at the centre of a presupposed spherical Earth?
No. Have I missed the gravity question?
Yes.
A fake experiment.
You haven't missed much.
No evidence for gravity then, eh? I thought it might have changed over the weekend. I believe there was a show.
Give it some time.
You'll have to fill me in what you're talking about, Anthony. I have no idea what you're on about.
But even some ballers now are claiming that gravity is not a force, but you can treat it as if it is. So, yeah, it's an aberration.
And
Give
who
it a
was
couple
that,
of
Owen?
years,
Did you
and we'll
say
have
his name?
say again. Was that you, Mel?
So
One
far,
sec.
it's only the ballers who've backtracked on their meaning of gravity. Flat earthers have remained steady.
Oh, that's good. At least we've got consistent nonsense on our side. Wow, that's great.
Arwin, who said that about gravity?
So are you saying, Nathan, your show is predictable because it's consistent?
Well, no. I'm saying that the people who arbitrarily assign a force to an arbitrarily assigned direction, at least they're consistent, was what you were saying, right? The flat earthers have at least kept their argument consistent, whereas the globers, force, non-force, that you can consider a force, isn't consistent, correct?
Correct.
Well, so what? If I consistently claim there's unicorn farts, does that give any validity whatsoever to my consistency in my assertion? Well, no.
Yeah, but we use the second law and the first law.
We're talking at cross purposes. I'm talking about the flat earthers who want to hold on to this idea that we've got gravity. That's who I'm referring to.
Oh, I see. Okay, gotcha.
We're talking at cross purposes.
No, I got you now. In that context, you're right.
Well, holding on to gravity, it's not even that. It's more like holding on to that there is a force disequilibrium. Holding on to the roots of what originally spawned gravity, as it is conceptualized now, in supposed science.
I'm going to go buy me a gravimeter.
I'll just use a scale.
Any evidence of the R value? Earth radius?
Radius. Can we find curvature first and then prove it's a ball first and then measure the radius? We missed a few steps.
Yeah, I'll agree, but it's used all the time though, isn't it? Let's be honest.
But I can give a Lewis train of argument to counter it though. If you can bear with me, as I bared sitting through that yesterday on Jose's.
So you got a Lewis Hackett. You're playing devil's advocate for Lewis Hackett. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay,
so what he said basically, this is his train of thought, okay, about curvature, about the obstruction. He said, look, if you're on a, and this is so straightforward walking into the pit, but look, if you were on a globe, then you would see the curvature, you would see obstruction because of the curvature. And then I told him, yeah, look, but you get that weird obstruction effect, a concealment, whatever exactly causes that remains a mystery, but you can empirically prove to yourself that when you look over a confirmed measured flat surface, there will still be concealment effects natural to optics. So there will always be concealment. And he would just say, no, because on a ball you would have concealment because of curvature. Therefore, what we see, it must be curvature. And wow. It's a ball. That happened yesterday on Jose's.
I must have turned off by that point, I think.
I think that's it. I think that concludes the housekeeping. I think we covered everything. Thank you for taking part.
Maybe they've had to slightly manage. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, that's okay. I was just seeing if everybody can hear me now and I'm not breaking everything up again.
Is that M. Scott Veach?
I'm clear.
No, you sound better.
Is that M. Scott Veach?
Excellent. Thank you. Unfortunately, no.
You sound a lot like him.
Oh, you want to be him? You want an astronaut?
No. I think him saying unfortunately was
that is.
Unfortunately, your assumption is wrong. I think that's what he means.
Sure. So, what are we going to talk about then? Let me put a cat in amongst the pigeons. There is no gravity. There is no universal up and down. Does anybody disagree? I mean, if you do, can we have some evidence?
I don't know. You don't. Yeah, you can't say there isn't a universal up and down, but you can't say there is because you must confirm that to be the case.
First. I'll tell you what's an interesting prospect. I said it in the last show. I'm not sure if we were live when I said it, but I'll say it again now. Oh, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to ask Paul the question because I never got a response from Paul, or is he not here?
He's not here.
Damn. I wanted to know when Bob presented the gravimeter, and he was using the gravimeter to make the point that there must be a bias. There's a direction of some kind. I think that there is an equally likely possibility or an equally likely interpretation for the thing that the gravimeter is measuring is either ethereal, and it's the flow of energy from above, electromagnetic or otherwise, or what other forces are there out there that are described as omnipotent, everywhere all at once, that might not be scientific, but nonetheless most people tend to accept that it probably exists. God, perhaps it's detecting the presence of something supernatural that is almighty that we can't do anything with. We know is there, but we don't have the interaction to communicate with it. Maybe it's picking that up. No. And I'm not saying it is. I'm just spitballing that it is picking something up. But the fact that science seems to be unable to prove what it's measuring by manipulating it indicates that perhaps it's God.
They don't do it. They don't manipulate it. They just deduce it again. It's just another form of a scale.
Can we all stop just making shit up, please?
I'm just saying that there's other explanations for what the gravimeter is claimed to be proving.
Yeah, the same thing as a scale does. It's a deduction-based system.
Yeah, Rumpus was going on about the scales before, calling us all morons. Is Rumpus still in chat? I'd like to address him if he is. Let's have a little look.
You know what's funny is when Bob was making his presentation on Globebusters, he said something basically like what Rumpus says, that weight is in fact a force. And in fact, I mean, Sleeping Warrior, in the last show, you were talking a little bit about the fact that, you know, that this is kind of irrelevant and this is taking away from the win against Mooser. Well, I mean, literally what Bob's arguing is that it is a force, the downward force. He may not want to call it gravity. He is arguing that that is in fact a force. And like, if his point has any kind of merit to it, it does kind of take away from the Mooser.
But what Bob's saying is that he realizes that gravity, the way we're told, isn't it? He said he expressly states that it is not mass attracting mass and it is not bendy space-time.
Right. He thinks it's something electromagnetic. He's all into the electric universe and all that.
And I'm not discrediting. I'm not dismissing that. That may well be true. But what we can all agree is that it's not this thing that we're being told, right? But what we shouldn't really be pushing is none of us should really be pushing it hard that there is anything causing it, because it may be something else altogether that's beyond our ability to interpret what we're looking at. It could be God that we're looking at.
Well, Anthony,
right. And I thought it was interesting on Globebusters too yesterday, but Hero kind of made the point to Bob at one point when Bob was talking about proving it, and he goes, well, you're showing something, but there's really no way to ever test this. And, you know, the usual thing. Literally, you cannot isolate the variable here, so you're never going to be able to prove it. The best you can get is a story, like I heard Bob tell yesterday.
Yeah.
Anthony,
go on.
Is it pretty obvious by now that Bob does not respect or accept the narrow definition of the scientific method as Nathan put out on his show, but conceded to it, but conceded to it at the moment, and then obviously we saw what happened after that, correct?
Shout out to Jose spamming the chat with his link. Yeah, it's obvious that Bob doesn't understand, or I don't want to say this in a bad way, but it's obvious that Bob does not know the strength of the independent variable, which is it's the presumed cause. You've got to wiggle it. And then when you wiggle it, you establish the cause and effect relationship, unless somebody shows that there is a different cause that causes the same effect and you got it wrong. If you demonstrate the cause and effect, then you are within scientific method. That doesn't mean that you infer additional causes.
Yes, but I want the application of my question to come out in a different way. So since he has already stated live that he doesn't accept the narrow method, he must accept some method, correct?
Yeah, but if he's going to not accept the narrowness of it, that makes him a pseudoscientist.
Well, exactly. So now, since he accepts some other method and not the narrow method, he comes out with this gravimeter. So where does that put that in relationship?
It puts it into a lovely story that we can't prove a cause and effect relationship.
Right. So why am I even listening?
Bob calls it the preponderance of evidence.
Yeah.
So why am I even listening to him after Mooser destroyed gravity and the intervening force between the two objects doesn't exist, but you can think as if there was one. Why would I mean, this is such a win on both ends, a win over everything.
I think ultimately, the reality is it's his show and he can do what he wants, kind of thing. But yeah, I think that the narrowness of the scientific method is important, because if you've got a gravimeter that you're going to claim measures unicorn farts, I mean gravity or some force or whatever, it's that. What kind of use is that as a piece of equipment unless you can manipulate it to prove a cause and effect relationship? And of course, the answer is it's pseudo-scientific, and it doesn't prove something. So yeah, it might be lovely, but
how many times?
Yeah, they did ask him that, right? They asked him what's the application for that thing. I mean,
how many times since I didn't see the show did he mention vacuum?
Not that many times.
But was it ever mentioned?
Although we did have to have all those thoughts.
Was it in relationship to the gravimeter though when he did?
Yeah, he had this mind exercise where you have like a hammer in space and you drop it. Which direction does it travel in?
Okay, so now he's violated the second law of thermodynamics and created a vacuum of space. So now here's another reason why I don't watch that show.
I think if I could say anything to Bob personally, I would say, Bob, look, at the end of the day, the independent variable is important. That's the backbone of science, because it proves the cause and effect relationship. If you've got a gravimeter that's got no cause and effect relationship, it's useless. It might be useful in future, but right now it's useless because it doesn't have anything that we can prove is a cause and effect. Certainly not in our realm. It might be of another realm. It might be spiritual or otherwise. Who knows what it's measuring? It does seem to be measuring something. What that is, we can just guess. It's spitball time. But you shouldn't be pushing it as absolute truth because you have absolutely no idea what's causing it.
But Bob, it seems like, and I can't speak for him, it seems like he's still going back to support. He's going back to try to support an original bias that he has, and he's has to bring in space. He has to bring in gravimeter. He's got to bring a loose interpretation of the narrow scientific method that we have understood, all to support a bias.
Correct. All to support pseudoscience as well.
Well, then that's easy. That's exactly what my assessment is. Why not just? I mean, think about this. 2019. We all have different backgrounds, and we're talking about the shape of the Earth. Obviously, it's what they've told us is not true, or else we wouldn't be talking about it.
Correct.
Could it be that he's just? Could it be that he's just got a wrong perception of how he sees science?
It's a bias. It's a bias because you're trying to force everything into your bias rather than accept it. Like if I get schooled on something, I have to say, you know what, I was wrong.
Right, but here's the thing is,
I'm sorry, Unusual, I muted you because you were causing feedback. My bad, I thought it was SX talking.
No, that wasn't me.
Sorry, Unusual, do you want to just pop yourself back off mute? I muted you because I thought you'd done talking and you were causing feedback.
Okay, there we go. Now I lost my train of thought, I think. No, but yeah, we lost it. I apologize. It'll come back.
My bad. Sorry.
I was gonna ask. I mean, could acceleration be the problem? Because it seems like he was trying to reiterate that obviously with acceleration you need a force, right? So could that be what's behind this? Like we need a force because we see acceleration.
So let me ask this.
I mean, because like how do you remember how Jaren said that, you know, if an object is falling, right, it's got a momentum, and if it's still in a medium that's less dense than itself, it's going to keep falling, and it would fall, and it makes sense that it would get faster as it fell. Like he said, it would be faster. It would be going faster in second 4 than second 3, right? That was the example that he used.
Okay, just before that gets addressed, just want to shout out, hold on, shout out to Leonardo Gonzalez for the super chat. Thank you very much indeed. What I will add to what you've just said is your story started with it about to fall. It's like, oh right, how was it in the position where it was about to fall so we could start the measuring of it accelerating from its position in disequilibrium, not in equilibrium? So what are we measuring here? Something that we've taken up? Because on the video that you played at the beginning of the last show, there was a machine throwing things in the air, was there not? So you're trying to explain a force for why they come down, and then have this non sequitur of the relative speeds that they travel. Well, what caused it was the machine throwing them up in the air. Before that machine did its thing, none of them were moving at all. But here we are with the effect of what the machine's done being studied.
Yeah, basically what you're saying is you're pulling the cherry tomato out of equilibrium and then blaming the machine, ignoring the effect of the machine, which is you pulling it out of disequilibrium,
right?
And then attributing a force to it.
Yeah, you've got a beach ball on the side of the beach. It's not doing anything. Might roll around if the wind blows it, but ultimately it just stays there, not moving up, not moving down, not moving in these arbitrary directions that we assign. Nevertheless, you come along, and you go, right, I'm going to grab this ball and force it into disequilibrium. Now, I struggle to get it into disequilibrium, expelling a bit of energy. Then I say to you, right, at this point now, what happens when I let go of the ball? Why does it go? What direction is it going to go exactly? Can someone tell me?
Going to go a direction that's relative to you, isn't it?
Well, just tell me, based on the explanation given so far, which direction is the ball going to go?
It's going to go
relative
back
to its density.
equilibrium.
But it depends entirely on where I've put the ball. So if I've struggled to get it under the water, then it's going to go relative to us up. Whereas if I've climbed up a tree and then dropped it, it's going to go relative to us down. Well, those two directions are entirely opposing each other, purely based on the medium that you forced it into in the first place. So before we came along, happy beach ball doing nothing, then we force it into disequilibrium and go, why does it travel in this direction at a given rate? Well, because you forced it into disequilibrium, that's why. Why do these things drop at a different rate? Well, you chucked them all in the air. The rate you can calculate based on their relative density.
Yeah.
And to that
Yes, it's all just relative.
That movement that is doing is what they call velocity, right? When the ball goes down or up.
Acceleration initially.
Acceleration, yeah. Sorry. I just like to call it displacement of the less dense.
Yeah, that's what I call it.
Yeah, it's a displacement. That's all it is.
Let me just address Chocolate's previous point. If you're in a car doing 100 miles an hour, is there a force acting on you whilst you're doing the constant 100 miles an hour? And basically, if you look at the definition for force, there's not an interaction, a push or a pull acting on you, because the car is the thing that's creating the force. I would say there is a force pushing on you, but it's the car. The car's pushing you in a lateral direction at that speed. But there's an argument to say, well, you're not feeling any force because you're in the stationary frame of reference that's inside the car. So because the car's got a momentum, speed, and because you're in a non-moving reference point inside the car, you've only got an apparent force on you. And as a result of your momentum, when you hit a corner, then when you make that turn at 100 miles an hour, you're going to get thrown across the car, right? But you haven't got a direct force on you because it's the car that's the force, not you. And I think that's a silly way of trying to describe forces, because you are in the car and the car is propelling you, right? That is really a force. But science says, nah, it's not. You're in a static frame of reference, so you're feeling the effects of the momentum, but it's not actually on you. It's on the car that you're in.
That's nonsense.
You're not technically receiving a force.
No. That explanation's not correct. So what's happening in the car is the car's pushing on the back of you physically in that direction, and that's become constant. It's still pushing you from behind in the direction that you're travelling at 100 miles an hour. Now, if you're a race car driver, you're strapped in, so you're prevented from moving, not just with the car pushing you from behind, because obviously if you slam the brakes on, what's in front of you to stop you? Oh, the steering wheel. Big shout out to Tina Baker for the super chat. Woo, $50, thank you very much. Yeah, there's nothing in front of you, there's just air. So because there's nothing stopping you and resisting you or keeping you as one with the car, you fly forwards or sideways if you turn left. So if you're strapped in, though, you suddenly become at one with the moving car. And there's not this apparent force. No, there's just nothing resisting you from carrying on going forward as the car was projecting you when it turns. It's like if you've got just a single pole behind you. You know, you're on a pair of roller skates with a conveyor belt that's getting faster and faster, and there's a pole that pushes you. Well, at some point, when the pole moves to the left and leaves you travelling along the conveyor, in other words, it's pushed you and then moved off to the left. Well, it moving off to the left doesn't change your direction because it's not pushing you in a sideways motion. It's going in a sideways motion. You just carry on forward. Well, the fact that there's a door in the way, in the case of a car, doesn't mean that suddenly there's this magical force because they describe the effect as an apparent force. It's meaningless. You know, you can describe things any way you like. It doesn't make them a force. If I describe getting dizzy and then say, oh, there's an apparent force of dizziness because I've experienced this effect, it's like, well, no, you can describe what happened with the effect. If you get into the great detail of how the car's not resisting you on a particular axis, and if it changes directions, you've got nothing to stop you travelling as you were in the current direction, well, that's not an apparent... That doesn't make the apparent force, the fictitious force, a force. It isn't. The only thing that's at play that's causing anything to be forced forward in the first instance is the car. It just doesn't resist you to the right when you turn left. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I just see it as a more just hijacking of words and mixing and matching and throwing them into equations, and just to reiterate that there's some type of force holding us down to the floor, and that same force is holding these celestial bodies in the air doing what they're doing. It's just bullshit.
I've just thought of another better explanation for how you can explain how directions are relative. In my example with the car travelling forward and then you turn left, you get thrown right. Would you agree? You get thrown into the right-hand door when you turn left. Would you agree?
Yep.
Does that mean that you're being thrown right?
No.
No. You're carrying on in the straight line, and the reference frame that was around you pushing you from behind turns about the direction that you're turning, and there's nothing to resist you on the right hand side, so you fly out of the seat and hit the door. From your relative position, you've travelled right inside the car, inside that frame of reference, but you haven't actually turned right. This apparent force has made you turn right. You haven't. You've continued in a straight line, and the car has turned around you. That's what's actually happened. But from your relative position, what have you done? Oh, I just moved rapidly right in the car. That's a relative direction. That's why it's not absolute.
Then if you had somebody sitting in the car, let's say in the back seat facing to the back, they would have flown to the left.
If they were,
if they
were in like a reverse baby seat looking out the back window or something.
Exactly, that's what I was thinking.
Exactly. Yeah. And the same applies.
That baby would be left.
Yeah, and the same applies to up and down. They are relative. These are directions that aren't absolute.
Yeah.
So there's been a change made to the show today. So for these debates going forward, I'm going to open up the Discord server. So I hadn't mentioned it at the beginning because I'm doing this very tentatively at the moment. There's only SX in there at the moment. But there is a Discord server which we've used previously to varying degrees of success on the Ballbusters show. But as I'm using it more and more, I'm mining out some of the creases. So if people do want to join, obviously it relies on me actually spotting you being in there and then opening your mic. But yeah, there's a Discord link now. So hopefully that'll encourage people to join the Science versus Pseudoscience Discord server. And yeah, they'll hopefully go out slightly more frequently on these shows. So there'll be 2 links. So typically the show does fill up fairly quickly on the Google Plus Hangout. So there'll be extra gaps, if you will, on the Discord server if you still want to join the show. The links will be refreshed each day, so they directly take you to the correct place. So there you go. YI. So have you, Ranty, there at the moment?
So, can everybody hear me again? Am I breaking up, doing horrible things?
You're all good.
We hear you.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think the argument about relative directions is pretty easy to understand. I think that, you know, if Bob was listening, that, not to speak for him or anything, but if he was listening to what you just went through right there, Nathan, I think he would say, sure, that all makes sense. But it goes back to what the bias is here. And I think the only thing that Bob's ever been trying to say, and he's trying to work at it at a roundabout way, is that he believes that the Earth plane has a bias, an electromagnetic bias of some kind that's attracting things towards it. And then he'll cite examples like acceleration down is faster, or the example in the zero-G plane with the density tower and all that kind of stuff. And so essentially he's just trying to really kind of losing my train of thought there, but essentially I just feel like he's trying to just prove that the Earth has a bias, that it's pulling it towards it. And so you can say whatever you want about relative directions. To him, he just feels that the same thing that's causing magnetism and the same thing that is responsible for the stars, which again, this is very similar to the heliocentric model, and there isn't really a lot to back it up aside from conjecture. But again, I just don't think the argument can be won with the people that are arguing this based on them not understanding what relative directions are, I guess is my point.
So the flat earthers who believe in an absolute down with a force attached to it are onto a loser, is what you're saying?
Well, they're definitely onto something that isn't able to be proven scientifically. Again, just bringing up, I think Jaron and Iru kept on trying to make that point to Bob yesterday during his presentation, that it's an interesting story, but you're never really going to be able to prove it. But from what I can see and watching Globe Busters for years and your show and all this, is Bob has a narrative. He has a narrative about the electric universe. He has a narrative about how all this works. He needs in his mind there to be a bias that sets up and down. And no matter how logical it is that, you know, whatever direction stuff went down towards relatively, that's going to be down. Like that, it doesn't matter to him because it fits into the whole rest of his worldview. And I mean, it's kind of the same problem that you ran into, Nathan, when you went and tried to explain about proving the spin of the Earth and all that ridiculousness. It's part of his narrative, and he's just going to defend it. And it really isn't any different than the globe. And I mean, I do think it is suspicious that this came up this weekend, right after the George Musa stuff. I mean, literally, that's what Globebusters should have been about, in my opinion. But
now that's a point I was going to make.
I do kind of
got a couple of guests in the Discord server,
right, so. And I don't mean to say that Bob's any kind of anything. It's just it's weird to me that this is the week that we would pick to choose about this, because literally Bob's point is saying that Musa doesn't know what he's talking about. Gravity is a force. Now Bob might not want to even call it gravity, but he was in the chat earlier. Downward force, completely undermines everything that was admitted in that Fight the Flat Earth interview, which I don't know. It's very interesting.
It's like your favorite sports team just won the biggest tournament of the year, and instead of talking about that a day or two later, you go talk about something that happened 20 years ago.
Right.
What will be, right? If people have still got this belief, then so be it. You know, we can address that.
But you said it earlier, Nathan. Who needs acceleration and a force? which side of the camp needs that?
That was going to be the next thing I came to. It's like, I mean, I don't watch a great deal of Globebusters. I did tune in periodically yesterday to see what was being talked about. But what's maybe someone on the panel can explain what is in it for Bob? You know, what does he need the Force for exactly?
Right, and again, I just think it's for his electromagnetic model that he has. That basically it's kind of similar to Nathan. You had that guy a couple months ago, the one who kept on talking about his 10,000 page scientific paper, and he had a similar kind of idea to it too. That it's creating that gravity is basically it's electromagnetic in nature, and it's just setting a small bias. And so again, like the globe people obviously need gravity because the globe can't work without it. But if you believe in this electric, and you see, I do a horrible job explaining it, but it's not my theory. So I guess I really can't feel too bad about it.
Can you hear us, Babs, in the Discord server? Is it Babs?
Yeah. I actually have a question. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you.
Yeah, okay. If I'm laying on my back, which direction is up? Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, we heard you. I'm waiting to see who gives you an answer.
Oh, okay.
In front of you.
Or let me change it a little bit. If I'm laying on my stomach, which direction is up?
What are you laying on?
That's not relevant to his question.
Laying on the floor.
He's laying on the floor. He's on his belly. Which way's up? Simple question.
Behind you.
Isn't that behind you?
Yeah, it's behind me.
Well, you just gotta put your face up, and that's pointing up, isn't it?
Yeah, so is up and down more of like a function of human senses?
Yeah.
Yes.
Rather than being an objective like direction?
Correct.
Yeah, in a nutshell.
Well, yeah,
Okay,
I mean,
perfect. Yeah.
if you're facing down on the floor, like he said, up, technically to you, your experience of up would be going behind you, right? Facing
I think
away
you did
from
something
you.
wrong there, Chocolate. You say facing down. You just gotta say facing the ground.
Yeah, facing. Yeah, if you're facing the ground, because
There you go.
because we're humans, that's what we call these things, right? So if you're facing the floor, in your experience, up would be going behind you, right?
No,
But
it
that
will
doesn't
be
really
going.
make sense because you're facing the floor, right?
You just gotta lift your face, and that's up for you. So whatever you're pointing when you lift your face, that's up for you.
I mean, even with your eyes closed, you can tell which direction up is. So it's not so much based on orientation. It's more so just like a sense thing.
No, you can't. Have you ever been on a car and like if you close your eyes, like in a long trip, and you go to sleep, and then you wake up, and you have your eyes closed, you cannot tell like where you at, or like in, how do I say? If you know like the roads, right? And you know which direction you're turning and everything. But if you lose sense of for a couple minutes of the turns and everything, you don't know anymore like which direction you're going. Then you gotta open your eyes and you gotta orientate yourself.
You mean when you get off of balance? When you get off of balance and your inertia gets screwed up with, I mean, you can still tell which direction up is, though. Even in a roller coaster, you can still tell which direction up is.
The example I put, if you're in in the middle of the lake and you're deep in the water, and somebody covers your eyes, and then they spin you a lot, then they tell you to point down. Where are you gonna point?
Towards the floor.
But you have your eyes covered. How do you know where the floor is?
Because you have this thing inside your head called an inner ear that lets you know which direction you oriented in.
They spin you. You know, you lost orientation.
And if you're spun.
Huh?
You might feel dizzy, but you can still tell the directions of up and down.
Well, no. Once your inner ear, once those three, what is it? I forget what they're called now. Those three little coils that have got a fluid in them, if they've all been shook up and shook about, then they're not referencing anything. That's what dizziness is. I mean, this is a fairly convoluted example, but it's an interesting conversation nonetheless.
Yeah, definitely.
So
the reason why you may be able on this example to point down to the ground is because the density of your body is gonna try to pull you to the surface, and that's why in that moment you're gonna realize like, okay, so I'm trying to go up to the water, and so you're gonna point down. But if you didn't have that density, you will not be able to tell.
It would orientate itself, and you would just be suspended there.
Exactly, yeah.
And then your natural instinct would be to point towards your feet, because to you naturally that's down.
Exactly.
But you could be floating upside down.
Only during a very short period. Only during that very short period of time when all of those fluids are mixed up in your inner ear. Only for a very, very short period of time.
Right.
At some point they'll settle.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I was just saying, just
Yeah,
but the density of your body would start taking you in a certain direction. You would know that that's up, just because you're a human. You would just know that's up, so you would know which way is down.
Yeah, based on that functionality of your inner ear, you then define what you call up and down. That's the point.
Doesn't people lose orientation when they get on that, like that roller coaster where you extend your arms and your feet and then you spin all over, like to all the sides? Doesn't people lose orientation on those things?
What do you mean, the gravitron?
I don't know.
No. It's like they have it on like, it's not a roller coaster. I don't know how to call them, but you stand your arms, they hook you, and that thing spins like in 3 different ways. You don't know what I'm talking about?
Oh,
yeah, it's essentially a gyroscope.
It's like a gyro.
Yeah,
some type of human gyro machine type
First
thing.
wheel.
It's making me nauseous just hearing about it.
Yeah, I know what he's talking about. I don't know what it's called though.
But the same principle.
That's only a temporary effect.
Exactly, the same principle applies.
What if one was in like the International Space Station though, with those fluids floating around?
Nah, that's in space, and
it's in a fake medium. You can't make the example in Narnia because we can't go there.
We will not go there. We're not Bob.
Yeah, nobody's going there. Can't go there.
Why do we need
that's why
acceleration?
That's why.
Sorry, say that again, 10th man.
So why do we need acceleration? Who would want to use that argument?
Someone pushing something?
Yes.
I think the question is why do we need acceleration? Why does acceleration need we have acceleration, but why does acceleration need a force?
George Muser.
How the math works.
George Muser said that between the two objects, there is no intervening force. Where is the acceleration?
Well, the acceleration is there. It just depends on what's causing the acceleration. Is the acceleration being caused by the mass of the objects that we're looking at, or is it being caused by a magnetic force? Which one makes more sense?
It's as simple as this. I get in my car, I drive to the grocery store, which is, say, 10 miles away. I need a force to get me there, and the car's my force, and it accelerates me there. According to Musser, though, I get in my car, and I'm at the store without the acceleration, without the force.
Yes. Let me just give an acknowledgement there to Nathan's last comment. Somebody said, who would push a force? And Nathan said, anybody wanting to push something. If you didn't catch the humor in that, it was funny.
I got it.
It were a good one-liner.
So what Musser did was destroy acceleration and the intervening distance between one point to another. And it sounds like Globebusters took a hit on their philosophy and had to come back and double down and side with somehow with acceleration.
Bob took it. Busters that I always feel that point this out. Bob is the one pushing this on Globebusters. Jared, Drew, and Morgile. Like I with Bob.
No, I don't
over the last few weeks.
Bob clearly is pushing it. Jaren's he's the one that's opposing it because Jaren's like sees it the way that I see it, and the other two are like, well, I'm not so sure. I kind of lean a little bit more towards Bob than Jaren at this point, but they're entitled to. We're trying to work this shit out, right? We don't know the answers, but what we're saying is that there don't need to be a force in our model. Yeah, it might harm the idea that the Earth must be flat if there is a universal up and down. I see that point.
Hold on a second, Anthony.
Hold on. The case just
Anthony, hold on. Pete, you're causing all sorts of terrible chaos with your sound. Hello, good to have you, though.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. It's all we can hear.
Hi, Pete.
Do you think there's a force, Pete?
Bob's example with a zero-G plane was ridiculous. I mean, he's literally taking this density tower and he's like, I'm going to shake it around, and I'm wondering why the liquids in this density tower are mixing. That's because you're shaking it around.
Yeah.
Zero G is impossible.
Right.
I mean,
and then
gravity
expecting it
exist,
to coalesce back together while it's falling.
I've watched that clip many times because Ballers have presented it to me loads of times, and it's Pete, turn your volume down a bit.
Okay.
Pete, it's the second time I've had to say you're causing audio chaos.
Because I've watched it that many times, you can literally get it in super slow-mo, and you can get it to the point where you see the guy jerk backwards, and it might be accidental, it might be intentional. It's difficult to tell because other people do seem to do the same thing too. But he jerks. Now, when he jerks, his arm jerks with him, and obviously the receptacle that's got the fluids in it goes with him with the momentum, right? He's caused it, but it collapses because he's caused that jolt. He does the jolt for whatever reason, but Ballers refuse to accept it. They literally, I've had it with Rumpus. Rumpus will not accept that he's jolted it, and I'm like, come on, all of them, they're all idiots.
Not just that, in the zero-G plane, the force of the dip causes you to move upwards. So what are they expecting is going to happen to a liquid, especially a liquid that has different densities composing of it? Like, they're wondering why it's mixing, but that's exactly what you'd expect to happen in a situation like that. It has nothing to do with gravity.
I agree. The thing is, if he's going to argue that the gravimeter is in some way doing something, right? Let's just say, for argument's sake, that it is. It's clearly at the molecular level. It's at the atomic level. It's not at a level that we can perceive. But then to argue that the zero-G plane is demonstrating that thing, that's like comparing a panel pin to a 15-inch bolt and saying that they both do the same job. Yeah, they do, but one's like trillions times bigger than the other, and you only need a panel pin, right? Because that's what his argument is with the gravimeter. That's the panel pin. And then he's got the zero-G plane. That's the sledgehammer. They're not comparable.
I think the only way you can make sense of this argument that Bob is putting up as a acceleration is to go to Musser and quote Musser. And Musser said, it's magical.
Anybody got an idea for why Jaren didn't cite Musser at any point? I mean, it'd have been on the tip of my tongue.
So let me quote Musser.
It's probably
So-
because I don't know. Bob doesn't like anyone challenging him. Maybe that's why.
Maybe it's because he doesn't want to glorify.
So here's Musser. So there's really no way that the force got from one place to the other in a sense of how it exerted its action. That was the magical component of Newton's laws, recognized by him and others at his time. I thought it was science.
Why does it matter? Why does it matter what Musa says? Does he make the rules? Like, what are his credentials? Why does it matter what he says?
It's just because he writes for Scientific American and he's perceived to be credible in his field. So it's not that necessarily personal to him. It's just personal to the role that he plays.
But hang on, this guy Musser, right? He's just saying what is sort of part of the established science since Einstein, and shortly before that as well, that the whole idea of force in the traditional Newtonian sense has been discarded in favor of this relativistic universe where everything is a product of the bending of space-time. So
he doesn't think
Yeah, but he's come out and
Well, he's a
confirmed the
knob.
point that we've been arguing this whole time is that gravity is not a force. That's
Yeah,
the
I know.
whole. That's the whole point that we've been arguing this whole time. That somehow
but
there's a force coming from the Earth, propagating and affecting the moon, the same way the moon's gravity is affecting the tides on the Earth. I mean, it's ridiculous. And this
But if
guy,
you're fighting with clowns who hold that position, and this is not the position of established science, then well, who are you fighting against? This is the ultimate purpose. But that is the position of science, right? That gravity is no longer a force; it is an effect due to the bending of space-time.
but isn't that
due
the
to
double
mass
speak?
of objects.
Isn't that the double speak though? Because
Of course it is.
It's not that it's no longer a force. It's that it was never a force.
But hang on, it's
They
all
turned
nonsense.
something that was never literally a force into some mathematics, and now we have a force. You know.
This is what I
So
say. It's all
I agree with
nonsense.
you.
Yeah, it's all
I
nonsense.
agree with you.
Metaphor.
That's all
All
nonsense.
Earth is metaphor. It's all metaphoric, right?
Of all the people Craig at Fight the Flat Earth could go to, he went to Musser. To what? To show Riley was wrong. And what does Musser do?
Well, he stabs him in the eye with a compass and makes Craig think somehow that he supported him with double
No, I
speak.
know, but what actually happened? It proved your point, Riley.
Yeah.
Musser,
I have a
he
question.
had anybody he could go to. He could quote, the deceased. He could quote Einstein. He could quote Carl Sagan if he wanted to. No, he went to a living person named George Musser to shut you down. And then George Musser lifted you up. I mean, this is fantastic.
I think we've got to remember the reason why he picked on that phrase. I think the way I interpret it is he brought up the point about, he said, if it was relative density, things would slow down as they get into the denser medium. And I said, that's exactly what Felix Bauengarder did on his atmospheric jump. And then I demonstrated it. He went from like 600 down to like 120 miles an hour. And it just basically poos all over his point, right? It makes him look like a dick. I think he took personal offense, not offense, but he took that personally and then decided that he was going to, right, I'll find you. What have you said that I think stupid? And he obviously picked on Snaps the Wand, right? So he picks on that, even though he's got it in writing in front of him. He's picked on that to go for. Of all the things, he could have picked anything, but that's the one he went for. And then he's decided he's going to challenge it. And when he's challenged it, Musa, if you look at if you look at how he presented himself, he would initially agree with Craig and then backpedal a little bit and then maybe agree with Craig again. But he was all over the place. He didn't say anything consistently. He would double speak throughout the whole conversation. And then somehow Craig got the impression that he supported Musa supported him. But to anybody that listens to the whole context, including the cuts that he's got that he won't address, he won't show what really happened. But although somebody said he has done, but I don't know where it is. But the point is, he's got these this devastating kick to the nuts, right? But somehow he's managed. He thinks he's supported by Musa, and I'm like, you must be so far in denial that you don't know what's real and what's not real anymore. There is absolutely no way that Musa supported you there, Craig. And for you to think that, yeah, you can think that in the same way that you can think gravity is a force. Don't make it that you won, though, does it? Everybody can see that you didn't win. But he's still pushing it that he did.
Right, let me ask you something. You say that. Okay.
I just want to say that you, from my understanding, you quoted Musser, and then the way Craig started his show, he says, quote unquote, my dad always told me, don't screw around, just go to the source. So I did. And here's my interview with George Musser, contributing editor of Scientific America, Suck It Riley. So Craig goes to George Musser, who you quoted somehow. Okay, I never saw that one personally. And he's going to now go to the source to discredit you. And then the source he goes to says that gravity is not a force, it's magical.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It is magic.
But this is their position all along. Is that not what Craig Fight the Flat Earth is doing in the first place? Is he's saying that, well, you've just misunderstood my position all along, and I knew exactly what gravity was, but for this purpose or that purpose, we can look at it like this. Is that not what's just been confirmed? Because, as I said, the whole notion of gravity in the traditional sense, force in the traditional sense, has been discarded 100 years now.
Right, because every time George said that gravity wasn't a force, he tried to get him to reiterate that yes, it's not a force, but it manifests itself as one. It's that cute word play that they're trying, right? That's what I hear when I hear Fight the Flat Earth saying things like that, and George himself.
All of them,
that to me is like it's like wizardry, magic. All right.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy even refers to it as magic himself, especially when a line like snapping the wand in two, implying magic, is what caused this entire thing in the first place, because that's the line that Riley picked out. And that's the line he had a problem with. So the guy comes out himself and says, yeah, we're talking about a magical force. Even brought it back to, it came from an idea when at the time science was, kind of magical. What? Are you kidding?
It's the magic of science.
And you're not quite explaining or putting across the deeper story and the long search over hundreds of years, as we're told, to get to the bottom.
And with that, I will say, if you are watching this on the Nathan Oakley premiering stream, then stay tuned, as there will be an after show to follow. However, if you're watching this live on Nathan Oakley 1980, first and foremost, a huge, massive thank you to all of you. Smash the super chat. Really do appreciate your support. Obviously, a massive thank you for tuning in, liking, commenting, sharing, subscribing, and all that good stuff. Again, a massive thank you to all of today's debating panel for making this debate possible. Be sure to check out the nathanoakley.com Flat Earth Debate Forum to keep up to date with the community debate. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I'll see you all in the next video. Stay tuned if you're watching on Nathan Oakley.
Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!
They need it for a variety of things. Most notably, the one that Conspiracy Cats likes to try and argue that we have gas pressure in a container. But that's not just one, that's one of many. But they need gravity, right? On our side, we don't need it. Yeah, it might be there, but it's absolutely not essential for us. It could be there, but, it's in the realms of, spitballing. It's in the realms of a little bit of fantasy, perhaps. We could talk about it, unofficially, as though it could be something. But we definitely shouldn't be pushing that it's absolutely something, that there is a universal up and down or whatever, because we do not know that that's true. If there was more evidence to support that assertion, it would be known, and there isn't. It requires the human to put the direction to it. But my point is, we don't need it.
There is a universal up and down. Nathan himself says anywhere you go on Earth, the stars are always up. Right, for everybody. So that's a universal up or down, and the universe, of course, is much smaller.
That's for humans.
For you, for everybody. Body being people, for us. So we're tying down a starting point in that sentence.
Yeah.
Well, it's relative to the
start. We've decided.
Yeah, but it's relative to the starting point, Pete. That's where you get your vector from. Well, if you're going to arbitrarily say we are the starting point, and it's always relative to us in our medium, well, no, we're not the centre of the universe. Sorry.
Well, we are the centre of the universe, Nathan.
Not in this context. Not in this you know what I mean. Don't be pedantic.
No, I'm definitely. No, I don't. Actually.
Well, here, I think I could say this. If you go back to when this whole globe thing started, say with Copernicus, for example, people said, well, how's the oceans and the lakes all sticking to a ball? Well, that's where they came up with gravity. Now, if George Musser was around back then and said, well, there's no such force, but you can think of it as a force, it's just magic, how far do you think the Copernican model would have gone?
Oh, you mean like even how Newton felt about his own laws, supposedly?
Yeah,
I mean,
very good.
it's a joke. It's a joke.
Before these questions come to mind, 10th man, is one fundamental question. It's whether the Earth moves or not, right? So once it's decided that the Earth is moving, then we have all of these wondrous and fantastical descriptions of our universe.
Can you show me?
Understand
Can
that
you show me
when we understand
where
that the Earth,
the Earth is moving?
Yeah, but
Can
hang
you
on.
show me where the Earth is moving?
But this is my point. Hang on, listen. When we understand that the Earth is not moving, then the ball does not enter reckoning or even the equation based on our universal experience of water at similar temperatures and pressures, i.e. flat when still at average temperatures and pressures. Right? So this is the whole point. And everything after that then will lead us to, well, the Big Bang universe and a full description of everything. But once we go back to that starting point, then gravity, in the sense, doesn't come into it. Gravity is a different thing, but the ball doesn't come into it either.
I had this discussion. This is one of the things I brought up earlier. This is something that I've learned, and I'm grateful to the show for. When I had a discussion with someone on gravity and the Earth, the ball, moving, not moving, all that crap, here's what happened. All right? Well, yeah, the Earth is moving. That's why there's gravity. And I said, look in front of you. Do you see anything moving? Are we obviously and observably flat, or do you feel a spin? They said, no, I don't feel a spin. It's obviously and observably non-moving flat. I said, good. So everything you just said is rubbish and bogus, because science, pseudoscience, not real science, has told you that water bends and gets stuck to this ball through a magical, and we got it from Musser, a magical force called gravity. I'm going to camp on that one for a long time.
Well, my point is none of it's true anyway either.
No, the point is, I won't keep talking. The point is, I'm not going to entertain a ball Earth with water
really there,
stuck.
but it's so suggestive.
Arwen, Arwen, please.
Yeah.
Arwen, I'm trying to finish a thought. That's the point. Why entertain the vacuum of space when it doesn't exist? Why entertain a ball with water when gravity is magic?
Right.
Because it's so entertaining.
Go on, Arwen.
I just said because it's so entertaining. That's why.
Right. So my point was that yes, it is all a fabrication. History is fabricated. So something has been fabricated for set purposes. And this is the idea of being able to cast what isn't aside, now focus on what is. So maybe gravity has a different sort of face when it comes to flat Earth. And this is the argument, really, isn't it? It is not as described, but maybe we can garner some clues out of.
Hang on.
I want to say though that I'm not against there being some type of electrostatic or dielectric component to how the density of things relegates itself out and separates and forces an equilibrium. I'm not against any of that. To me, it's just can we prove it? What can we prove is the thing that I want. I'm not against other theories. That's why I don't want to hate on Bob, because I understand because there are people who want to know the why, as opposed to the how.
I want to respond. To the
separate according to density.
Well, Chocolate did.
So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Chocolate, did you hate on me when I was doing the same thing a few years ago? Exactly.
No, I was trying. How many times when you were going through that with Riley, I said, I think Arwen is trying to understand why things separate in the density disequilibrium, why that happens. I think that, I mean, that's what I heard every time you were arguing with Riley. Like Riley was saying, it separates because of density, and you're saying, okay, but why is it separating because of density? Maybe you weren't saying it in that way, but that's what I heard when you were saying it.
I literally ended up saying exactly that. That was like the final thing, and then I just let
And
it.
I don't blame people for asking that, but what the hell can we prove for a fact? And then
Think
just
about it.
using this
Entertain-
word gravity, that it's some force that's coming from underneath my feet that's pulling things down. But meanwhile, I can let go of a helium balloon that goes up, and I mean, it
It's being
just
supplanted. The other things that are heavier are pushing it up.
yeah.
That's how
And I get that there is pressure. There is, you know, we live in a dynamic system. I get all that, but again, why that force coming from underneath my feet? It's stupid. It's stupid to me.
Let me try.
If we ended up calling it the law of relative density, what the question about why be irrelevant?
So
is that a stupid statement to make?
No, I've thought of that myself. Like maybe there is some type of, well, I don't know. We call it law because, you know, we're humans. That's what we do. So we name things laws that. But I mean, yeah, there is some type of separation in density.
There's order.
Right. And I mean, at some point, all natural phenomena is going to get to a point that we don't understand the cause of it directly. So, I mean, isn't a large part of it trying to cut out the unnecessary steps? It just reminds me when you guys were having the religious debate and the old infinite regress fallacy, and like there's a God, but then who created the God, et cetera, et cetera. Isn't that sort of the same thing with relative density? If you say the reason that relative density happens is because that's a function of reality, then you kind of can stop there without any forces beyond it, right?
Right. That's
exactly. Be called the law. Shouldn't relative density be called the law?
So this is what I say about we have to look at the greater picture here. Flat Earth is just the beginning. So what is the greater story attached to our reality? And maybe if we leave out one aspect of it, we will never understand another aspect. And this is where speculation comes into things. And sure, yeah, gravity, you hold a possibility for that chocolate. So what does everything begin with? It begins with a thought. You, the individual, considering things. And I think we can know
I
a
get
whole
it.
hell of a lot more than people think we can know.
I completely agree. To me, I keep going back to an example of going to the top of a house and dropping a brick. You know, obviously, I know the brick is heavier than the air. It's more dense. It's not going to be supported by the air. I drop it. It's going to accelerate downwards, right? I know that.
Gravity. Sorry.
Now, I don't think there is a force coming from underneath the floor pulling that down. To me, that's nonsense. And as was told, is magical. So to me, I just feel like whatever it's made of, its own density, its own, I don't want to use the word weight, but whatever it's composed of, mixed with the momentum of its moving, its heaviness, whatever you want to call it, it's causing its own acceleration downwards.
Yep. The relative disequilibrium causes force disequilibrium.
And you can't just remove the earth underneath and see what happens to brick, you see. And this is the whole thing about we'll have to come to some sort of terms in terms of describing what the earth might be. I think that's the necessary next step. And I think outside of this sort of platform, there are many different areas where different advancements are being made.
Right. Now, I agree. And if there is some type of electrostatic component going on in between me letting that brick go and it reaching the ground, if that somehow is causing the the separation and it's causing the direction, you know, I'm not against that. But until I can prove that, you know, I can't mess with it.
Like,
you know, let's go. We can prove, because we can't prove here we are being told that gravity is not a force when we've been arguing that we can't prove it, and you know, like I have to dismiss that. You know,
the only variable to prove it, and that counts.
The only acceleration in that story, Chocolate, was you picking up the brick, taking it on top of the roof and letting go so it can find its rest again, equilibrium. You caused the acceleration. There is no force other than you picking it up.
Right.
Yeah,
But
I get that.
I owe 10
And the acceleration starts from the moment I let my fingers go,
Yeah,
because it's not moving. It's at 0 miles per hour. I open my fingers. The acceleration begins.
Hold on.
I didn't apply force
Well,
to
hang
it.
on,
All
hang
I
on.
did was
We've
open
got
my
audio
fingers.
chaos again. It's like you just
Yeah.
ignore the audio chaos. Just I'm talking, so who cares if anybody can hear what I'm saying? Hey, Arav, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Very well. Very good to have you.
Could I just say to Pence, man, so we have to go further then and ask, well, where did the brick come from, or why is this its equilibrium point? Without trying to answer those type of questions, I think, you know, we are going to be astray with any answers that we try to come up with in terms of an explanation for the real world here.
Well, we're back to the ontological primitives, aren't we?
No, I wouldn't necessarily say so, but it is an area that has to be broached, right? And if we just leave it again, and I understand there's a distinction between the sort of a debate on both sides, back and forth. I'm not really part of that, but as I've been encouraging people to think in terms of is what have we replaced the vacuum of space with, or how do you picture your vision or your mindset regarding flat Earth?
Well, a vacuum is
like no other.
Well, a vacuum is highly theoretical. You need to seal a vacuum to have a vacuum in the first place. So the next question begged is, what is sealing the vacuum of space? This is just a theoretical abstraction that's made possible by gravity organizing matter into absolute matter and absolute space. It's not, seen in reality. Really, matter versus a vacuum is a continuum. There's no such thing as absolute matter and or an absolute vacuum, like per se, because if there were, then you would have a vacuum of space where there would be no matter, but there's matter in space, even in the quote unquote the vacuum of space. And even in the current model of the atom, most of the atom is empty space. So things are more on a continuum. These, distinctions are artificial between, matter, non-matter, energy, matter without energy. They're very arbitrary. And maybe we need to look at things as more of a continuum in some ways.
What would we consider space? What would we consider space, Orave, in a flat Earth sense? Now, we have done away with the vacuum of space, the infinite reaches of this empty vacuum, and we have, I'm speaking in general, we have placed a container around ourselves, and we are being separated from something. Now, if we were to think in terms of everything being within the confines of the Earth, is there a place for empty space, a vacuum of empty space within?
Not actually. It's probably the waters above, just like the scriptures said, but materialistic atheist scientists are going to shy away from that, probably because they have a desire to shy away from the creator. But if you're talking about a vacuum, and a vacuum is an artificial lab construct, and even in the vacuum, you have ether. So I would say that you can evacuate the tube of air, but you can't evacuate it of ether. The ether will flow in and out of the tube regardless of whether or not you evacuate it of air.
So depending on the nature of this container.
And I get into that again. I made that argument yesterday, and that is that a vacuum, under no circumstances whatsoever, whatever you subject, it will never be in existence. Yeah, it will never be there next to gas pressure. There might be lower pressure in one part than another, but there will never be an actual really vacuum next to much higher pressure in the same container. That never occurs, no matter what.
But that's why these guys are now trying to argue that it's not an actual vacuum and that it's just a lower pressure.
Hang on, please. Don't say never, Arwen, because
never, no matter what forces you subject to it. So
but hang on.
Centrifuge spinning at 1,000,000 rounds a second.
Hang on, please.
No forces that you subject to it will cause.
Don't make assertions you cannot prove.
Okay, hang on. Listen, the reason I said don't say never is because I would say it depends on the nature of the container. So if you can imagine a really small and strong magnet and putting it into a pot of water, hanging it from a pot of water or something like that, and you can imagine the field being so strong that it creates some sort of a bubble, right, and a separation between that field and the waters beyond. This would have an effect in terms of proximity to the the source itself or the container, let's say, in terms of reality. So there is a possibility that depending on the nature of this container, we could have this evacuated zone immediately beneath, and everything down beneath that then less exposed to this direct influence. If you can sort of follow my
there's
gist.
no sort of precedent for a force being able to contain a gas. So we're back in the realm of theoretics. Usually, you need something solid to separate and contain a gas. You never have a force separating a gas like electromagnetism, gravity, or whatever. So that's in the realm of theoretics. Until they can really demonstrate it. It's an attractive theory, and some people would probably even like to ascribe to it. But until then, you still need some sort of mechanically made separation device between this layer over here. I mean, this vacuum system over here, and this non-vacuum, if the vacuum exists at all.
Hang on, if we don't know what forces we're dealing with, if we don't know what forces we're dealing with here, we'll all come on board the idea of a creator and a higher power. And these are the sort of questions we're asking. So we're just, first of all, getting that thought into our brain. And that's why I said to Arwen there, sort of never say never, because...
I absolutely will.
Right, well,
it's good to keep our minds open because you never know what you might find.
Nothing that exists can violate the law of nature.
Well, you have to define what nature is, Arwen. You have to define what nature is.
Something that has to be possible somehow, that the creator understands and designed it as such. It cannot come. Nothing can come into existence that violates the law of nature.
Right, but you don't understand what the creator understands.
That's not relevant to the matter. Nothing that violates the laws of nature can exist.
Well, I mean, you don't know what the sun is, right? But the creator does because it created it.
Case again.
Well, you wouldn't be able to say what's impossible or possible with it.
Refute what I just said.
Well, to get to the unseen realms, we have to have revelation from that unseen realm with the spirits or whatever, or we have to assume that we have some sort of operation here that is constant throughout these systems from the known to the unknown. So that's what philosophy is about, using our known systems to get to the unknown logically. If you cannot use known rules to get to the unknown, then that's kind of going into the realm of magic and saying that there's not a common system here that is upheld by a creator or whatever that holds in all the systems.
It's ridiculous. The spirit realm falls outside of the law of nature, of course. Why were you even doing that? It's ridiculous.
But if it interacts with the physical realm, it would still be under some rules if it has any sort of interaction, would it not?
If you presuppose it, yeah. But you don't need...
Imagine we took everything...
Yeah, but we would never be able to really truly know what those interactions would be.
Let me ask Arwen. Imagine for a second, Arwen, when we took everything
that doesn't take away the
natural. Imagine that.
I'm sorry, man.
My question was to Arwen. Imagine we took everything that was actually unnatural and labeled it natural. How would we know the difference?
Oh, you true.
I think we'd find a creator, first of all, and a higher purpose, right?
Nature.
So then we'd work our way through it via thought.
Breaks it, then it's not a law of nature. It was removed.
If all you have is a rusty old broken down bike to examine, and you have no idea of the pristine new condition it came in, well, then you would describe that as normal, right? Because there's nothing else to compare it to. And every little examination you did of it, this would be considered
not
a benchmark
standard scientific thing. That's personal.
Or natural. That's what I mean. Normal, natural, a sort of a set, fixed way of being.
Natural in a colloquial sense. I'm not talking about natural in a colloquial sense. I'm talking about physics and the natural world. Reality.
Right.
Material.
That's what I'm talking about as well.
Related in that maybe, God set things in motion, and then if you don't mess with the clock or whatever you set in motion, that's natural. Physics natural, nature natural. Unnatural implies an intelligent will kind of coming in and intervening with that system that was already established in a way. I guess you could try that as a definition.
But that's supernatural. Science specifically excludes that.
I mean, I'm willing to say that there are probably laws of what we would call laws of nature that we're not even aware of yet.
Yep.
You know what I mean? To think that humans are we just know everything, I think that's just ridiculous. I'm sure there are plenty of things going on out there that we have no clue about. So I get trying to get to the bottom of it, like Pete likes to say, you know, but until we can prove what we're talking about, it's kind of just speculation, unfortunately. But it's good to get it out because, ideas are good to get out and share. So
Once
that's
we
why I
once we reconnect with a higher power, I think that in our brain, in our heart, must come the idea that we can figure this out. We were always meant to be able to figure this out. And look, maybe we're all being reborn now in terms of we're being reborn into reality, for the first time. And the world of illusion has been torn apart. And there is a greater tale there to be pieced together. And that we need to start thinking in new ways. And I think the most dangerous things that we can do as individuals is to bring well cemented ideas that were with us beforehand into our new realm, because there's a big danger that they will corrupt our thinking and have indeed been put in place for us from the start for that very purpose.
I will agree with you, Pete. I will agree with you, and I'll also say that imagine that we had all the time that's been spent on this heliocentric model. Now imagine all the time that we would have had to actually have discussions like this and actually try to hash out the reality of the world instead of wasting all of our time learning about, balls and people sticking to balls spinning around in a vacuum. you know I just feel like so much time has been
Maybe that was
lost.
a necessary part, Chuck.
What about the meteor that's about to fly just past the Earth?
Oh yeah,
So large it has its own moon.
that's today, right?
Well, the thing is, if meteors are going to be kept out by a dome or just chunks of the dome that fell off, no need for alarm. We're going to be fine. We're in a contained system.
Are you
We're
serious,
protected.
All
We're going to
right.
be fine.
If something
they're-
hit the dome, presuppose there is a dome, it would hit it from the outside as large as a moon. Okay, it would ring the freaking dome like a bell. Everything, there would be like huge pressure fluctuations.
Like a thunderclap.
it'll be
Oh
fine.
my
It'll
goodness.
be fine. It'll be fine.
That would be
And it
that'd
looks
be
like
interesting.
this is a physical realm. Beyond, there's probably some sort of spiritual realm of light. There probably isn't anything physical beyond there hardly at all that's going to interact with our world, if you ask me. Because there are occultists who say that on the realms of Mars and on the planets of Jupiter and stuff live spirits. So it looks like that's a spiritual realm. It's not a physical one. So we're probably going to be just fine. The physical stuff is down here on our side more than likely. But I don't know.
Why do you guys listen to all this space garbage?
Well, my problem is the fact that stars actually do disappear at high altitudes. That's just a weird one on me.
That could be from perspective in reverse. You could be so close to the flat plane or whatever up above that you don't have enough wide viewing angle to see the stars. But if you get lower in that regard, you can see the stars again. It's just like the flat plane, but in reverse up top. It may not be flat though. You're just close to it in proximity and don't have enough of an angle to see the stars. But who knows?
Have any of you guys ever read World Beyond the Poles? It's 1920s, 30s books. Basically, it's kind of interesting because what he thinks, and it's it's speculation on steroids. Let me make sure to say that first is basically if you walk beyond the poles, that somehow you'll eventually start to walk to these other planes like Mars and any other planet or skylight that you can think about, and that it's just from our perspective on Earth that it seems like they're above us when they're actually much further out. Was basically the thesis of the book. It's an interesting book. Should check it out if you're bored.
That ties into what I was going to say to Chocolate. So for me, these are all observer-dependent reflections, and maybe that's the code behind them moving the moon into the Earth's atmosphere, letting us know that it is through our atmosphere, and I say the water particulation in the atmosphere, or the water in its invisible water vapor phase allows us to see these invisible energy reflections, which manifest as lights. And this is why when we get beyond beyond the lower atmosphere, these stars tend to disappear. The moon tends to get smaller as well, and the sun a whole lot closer looking. And far from circular and spherical as well. But let me just say, to tie in what I'm saying about replacing the vacuum of space, from my thinking, it's water's there. And one of the basic properties of water is its reflectivity. So when we're looking at the sky, we're looking at a mirrored sky and a series of reflections. A Lucy in the sky with diamonds. Right?
So,
hey, how many of you? How many of you
saw
the Indianapolis 500 yesterday and NASA's wonderful brainwashing commercial?
I didn't see it. I heard about it. I heard something about that, but I didn't get to see it.
Okay, well, here's what I've been able to follow and somehow construct what's going to happen in the future. Not claiming to be a prophet, but it's pretty obvious what they're doing. Every major sporting event, every major TV self-recognition show, anything major where a lot of people are going to watch for these NASA space trip to the moon 2024. The conditioning is starting again because they've been hit a major blow.
Yep.
Well, you also see it in the latest X-Men movie because they're going up to save like a shuttle from NASA and take the crew out from a rogue spaceship. When the comics, the original source material didn't quite, as far as I can remember, from like the shows and stuff, didn't go in that direction. You know, and the old 1990s X-Men cartoon was very faithful to the comics as far as I could tell. And so, based off of that, they didn't involve NASA. That's, brand recognition and, and stuff like that right there.
Well, they're pushing they're pushing the alien hybrid narrative because there's going to be a supernatural show coming to a theater near you.
Of course, you're our own X-Man.
Absolutely.
Man, 10 is X, of course. So we have our very own X-Man on the panel.
Very true. And the thing is, another thing with that, they had Brightburn, which is like an evil Superman, and we get a reboot of these Superman X-Men movies just about every 10 years now. With Marvel, that's going to be a regular dosage of propaganda into the culture. Not to mention, the occult side,
The scarier part is the scarier part is I have a couple kids and I've been watching the PBS Kids show. Everything on there is space propaganda. I think a week from now they're going to be having a "We're Going Back to the Moon" special. I mean, they have a show called Jet Propulsion that's basically based off of Marvel, Parsons and whatnot. It's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous.
It's a difficult time to be a parent in these times because what do you
the way they excuse me, the way they're going to fool the world again is with aliens, because that's the only way that's the only thing left they got to prove space, because we've destroyed it.
So do you think that's going to come before or after this whole push to the moon 2024? We're going to stay bullshit, because I hear what you're saying. They're going to push that hard, because when I saw the first little 3-minute whatever commercial that they did for it, I was like, okay, you guys seem to be a little serious now. And then they released another one with all these executives talking, and I was just like, wow, okay, you guys are really going to push this bullshit narrative that you're going to the moon, back to the moon in 2024.
Well,
and you're showing all this technology.
Yeah, they had all these
go ahead, I'm
movies
sorry.
too. My bad, I'm sorry. I was just talking about the Natalie Portman movie that just came out too. They had like 2 or 3 space movies, didn't they?
Yeah. And the whole point of that movie in particular was that she was an astronaut and she saw the Earth from from the outside, from space, and now she comes back to Earth all fucked up because just the adventure of going out there or something like that. I mean, that's what I got when I saw the preview for it, and I was just like, "Isn't this cute?"
Yeah. And they had a commercial, like a Verizon Sprint commercial, where the astronaut was up in space calling her husband down on Earth, and I'm like, this is a little much. I'm sorry, this is a little much for me. Being on the other side and having taken the blue pill, I'm like, I'm not buying this anymore.
Dude, there
Well,
was a
being
Pizza Hut commercial the other day, and they just had a giant, for no reason whatsoever, just show the pizza was big and it's flying around in space. And I was just like, what the hell am I looking at? I'm like, oh, you guys are really going hard with this, guys. It's adorable.
It's the individual help here, always. I
chocolate.
mean, I
Chocolate,
just
you
talked
got
about it.
the
What do we tell our children here when it comes to too obvious fakery like this? It's a dilemma, isn't it? Because on the one hand, of course, we know we're dealing with nonsense, but on the other hand, we know that if our children were to entertain these thoughts seriously, there's going to be major conflict between the education system we send them to and also their friends, etc. outside. So, I mean, what's the overall thing? As you, I'd like to ask Ori that, especially because you bring such a religious aspect into everything. I say we're living in a time of revelation, and there's sort of everything has been exposed and revealed through this absurdity almost at this stage. And
God has poured His Spirit out on man, and people are prophesying and stuff like that. They're seeing beyond the veil. And the thing is,
Right.
the postmodernist Marxist milieu, we can take a couple cues from these people that are driven by nothing but will to power. You talk about the will behind things. Now, in this Marxist milieu, you only get to talk about the will of the oppressor, the white person, the capitalist, the Western person, but you need to talk about the will of everybody, including that of the quote-unquote victim and these evil powers. You need to say, okay, why are they pushing this? What is their will behind this? Atheism. Replacing God. And then little Johnny, Jimmy will be like, well, what's God? And that leads to other, conversations where, you can get counter narratives in here to deal with their witchcraft will, their will to power, and their will to deceive. But the thing is, we need to talk about the will of all the people involved, the will to follow God, the will to leave him behind, the will to make science God and man's intellect God, the will to submit to God and to honor, him through science by looking at him as the master architect and stuff. This is the stuff we need to talk about.
Very good answer.
I'll say I'm not very religious myself, but I think revelation is a good word for what's going on because a lot is being revealed. I agree with that. Whether it's coming to terms with flat Earth or there being a creator or even just to take it down to the level of understanding that even your governments are lying to you. Even that, I mean, that's a revelation in itself. All that mixed together, and the fact that this is getting as big as it is, and it's just, I don't know. I see it as a really good thing.
The question is, why are they making the media hoaxes more obvious? Why are they making
I got a good answer for
more
that.
obvious?
I got a good answer for that.
Yeah.
All right. So if you go back to when they started all this, they wanted to get rid of scripture. They wanted to get rid of the essentiality of God who created everything. And they've done a pretty good job. And now they teach evolution and all this stuff. Now it's about to flip. And because it's about to flip, we're getting this revelation ahead of time. So what's it all about? It's very simple. All the people that believed in matter and evolution are all going to be supernatural now because there's going to be a show in the sky and it's going to be spiritual in nature, but in the scripture, it talks about it being demons, not extraterrestrial. So it's a flip-flop. All the people that said there is no spirituality, there is no God, all of a sudden they're going to say, oh, aliens, and they saved us from this meteor, and they did this, and we can see them. How could you say they don't exist? They're right there floating in the sky. Okay, except the Christian's going to say, yeah, this is exactly what the book of Revelations talks about. This is the great deception. Don't fall for it. They're demons impersonating.
Oh gosh, who do we believe? Who does the common man believe? Not to mind the conspiracy-minded man.
Well, I mean, just look at the commercials. Look at what they've done in the schools and the universities. I mean, think about it. I got a quote here that it makes so much sense, but they wouldn't teach this. They have to teach something like evolution. Here's a quote. If there was a time when nothing existed, then nothing could ever start to exist and nothing would exist now. But if something does exist now, there must have always been something in existence. It makes total sense. God.
Yeah, and there always is an unmoved mover, like in the locomotive. you have the cars that really don't move of their own volition. They're moved by something else that's dragging them along and moving them. But even that thing that's moving them has the motive force inside of it and is moved and unmoved at the same time. That's basically what God is. He's the one who sets up everything and makes it so that it's in motion. Otherwise, it wouldn't go anywhere. And so the realm of the spirit has been denied, but science has not, materialistic science has not offered an explanation for, what moves matter beyond, matter itself, and they get into these mad infinite regression problems where, it's like, well, if gravity is pulling stuff together, well, then it must be something physical. So what's the gravity for gravity and the gravity for that gravity for that gravity? These are infinite regression problems that happen when you're stuck in one realm and you push out the others. They don't even care. They just wander down this theory, that theory. They don't care. They're mad.
Well, Rafe, are you canvassing for a particular God? You know what I mean? As opposed to that general idea, well, there's no denying, that's fair enough. But are you canvassing for a particular notion or idea of God? And I mean, how can you verify that this is true in relation to an ineffable, unknowable, creator? How can we know what's what? That's my bigger question.
You go by the books that are talking about him that seem to make the most sense historically and have the most verifiable facts. You pray to him. You pray to the God that made you. The one that seems to be most filled with the Holy Ghost of truth and spirit. If you're being honest about it, and that appears to be the biblical Jehovah. When you look at the flood, it happened. It has a lot of historical cities that are actually verified. And a lot of it is true. And when you read it, you can feel the Holy Spirit inspiring you with wisdom and truth. You read some of these other texts and they're filled with occult darkness. It's a type of light, but you can tell that it's a light that's going to lead you to destruction or to hell. And so, you got to watch out. It just depends on whether or not you want to serve the God that made us or serve yourself and or Satan.
Would you agree that we are splinters of God, or is this what our soul is, or our spirit? Is it an aspect of the greater power? And would you agree maybe that the best way to seek God is to search for the God within, that splinter within?
You always look for the beginning and the end. And the end of such a thing is a heresy where you're God and you no longer search for the true God. So I would have to say no based off of where that leads to. But I see what you're saying in that we do have God's spirit, yes. But the heresy becomes where you look for yourself to be God and forget about the real God.
What about people that... well, let me ask you this question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, far away.
I just wanted to add... and I'm not certain how to pronounce your name. Urav, right there.
Arav. Most people call Lemon Bird because of the avatars.
Beautiful. Well, my question is: Do you believe that it's possible that there's other extra dimensional beings, spirits, as you were, aside from God? I mean, you mentioned Satan, so I guess that's a yes.
Yes, spirits, angels. Those seem to be the main thing. Spirits, demons, angels, disembodied giants, Nephilim, that sort of thing.
Right. And so my point kind of isn't it somewhat, and it might not be difficult for you because everybody has to walk their own path and figure out what's true for themselves, but isn't it possible that somebody could commune with, say, one of these entities and perceive it to be the creator and it not be so?
Yes, that's why we have to try the spirits. We have spirits around us all the time that are just kind of like hanging out. And the thing is, if we die, we can get a very convincing impersonator that knows our habits, knows our speech, probably even knows the events of our life that can very convincingly impersonate us. So that's why God enjoins us to try the spirit, to make sure that it is of God.
I understand. I don't think I'd describe it the same way, but I see what you're saying. Thank you.
Is God
No problem.
indivisible, Orave? Because I mean, it's a he always, right? This is how we refer to God. Is God indivisible, or is God male and female in one?
God is a spirit.
Well, he is a spirit, but the thing is, he's revealed himself to us as a male spirit, so we better use God's preferred gender pronouns. And the thing is, this idea that he can be, kind of like two essences in one, that might be a bit of a problem. It depends on how God reveals himself to us, I guess, but he is a spirit. But I guess that's a complicated question, but it looks like he's revealed himself to us as a spirit. So.
No, it's just very interesting because I read Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 in a different way, and one is a different story than the other. It's sort of continuation where the other left off. And by nature, I think that we are male and female in one, and we're having a divided experience here. And this is what I say, well, at least to myself anyway, is that we can make inroads into understanding our experience we're having here.
A spirit is neither male nor female.
Right, right. And all the angels are androgynous as well. Isn't that another factoid?
I believe they say the spirits are male because they came into the daughters of men, not the men of men, and said that they were lovely. That implies a sort of sexuality, I guess you could say, or at the very least, something that says that these men saw these women and, lusted after them. And I guess what we would call, some sort of male-female way. But who knows?
The material, the matter, right? It's interesting to note that matter and water, we have the M just turned upside down. But yeah, this state of division and this unification to produce the miracle of the child, of course, all of us here, well, maybe this is something we consented to be part of for the experience. And if we look at it like that it's a massive puzzle. I call it the great game of life, there to be pieced together. Then, well, all of these things can maybe start to make sense. And I definitely agree with you in terms of higher powers, whatever you might call them, present. It's just a completely different realm for me anyway these days.
Well, I mean, the Eastern religions kind of do what you're talking about, where you look within for godhood and abilities, and you work on, developing your own self. But the West tends to look without and to look on the outside for God, which forces you to look for an objective God outside of yourself that you serve. If there is a God, that would probably, be a better route than just turning inward, and forgetting about it.
Well, that's not actually my position as well, or I've talked about Aristarchus before, and there is this intimate connection between everything external and everything internal. So there's no separating one from the other. And it is by that combining of the East and the West there, as you say, even though never the twain shall meet, that we come maybe to a greater picture and understand that everything is perhaps part of everything else.
The biblical God.
P, can I ask when and I know everybody comes at you with the Aristarchus thing, right? So let me ask, when you speak of Aristarchus, are you meaning like the man? Because I know there was supposed to be a guy, Aristarchus, right? Or is it some type of
a very significant guy, Aristarchus of Samos, and we never heard about him, or at least until I mentioned it anyway. But he, before Copernicus, was the first to put the sun at the center and have the spherical bodies, Earth and others rotating around. So he should have been. Should have been on the tip of every ball earther antagonist's tongue when they came defending the ball earth, But no, the man himself didn't exist. Chocolate. So this is all.
Okay. So to you, what's his significance, or what's the significance in the Aristarchus? Because I want to understand it. I'm not coming at you cross. I want to understand it, where you're coming from with it.
Not to take up the whole time as well, but as briefly as I can put it.
The cliff notes.
Right. Okay. Well, Aristarchus is the tree of life. It's Mount Meru. It's Yggdrasil. Right. When we look at the moon, we can see crater Aristarchus. We'll note the similarity between crater and creator. There's only one crater. We're looking at a mirror sky, which is waters beyond, and we're seeing reflections everywhere. So Aristarchus is the decapitated tree of life. This is what we remember at Christmas time when we take a tree and artificially light it up. So when it was intact, we had a tree in place above and below, and it was generating a toroidal field which withheld the waters beyond. So you had the realm. Let me just finish this. So you had the realm within. Then when the tree was decapitated, you had a collapse of the barrier above and the birth of the sun, the moon, and all of the luminaries. And now, as I say, you can see Aristarchus in its reflected form from the crater on the moon, but you can also experience it everywhere, from the cloud patterns that are the same patterns on an earth-wide basis to the different patterns on water and on sand. So just to finish, last thing, Aristarchus goes all the way to the heart of our matter. So when they talk about Mother Earth and Father Sky, it is in a much more real, significant relationship than we will even ever imagine.
So you're saying that Aristarchus is this way to connect all these ideas on a high level. You're connecting 100 ideas in a word, which is interesting.
Right.
But for a person who doesn't have all these ideas, we're just trying to get one string that's somehow linked to Aristarchus. Sometimes it's just good to just focus on one thing and just go on that journey with that person. Kind of similar to what I imagine God is doing. He probably has a million Aristarchuses in his mind, but he's willing to go through a lifetime of learning with us, slowly and patiently. Maybe we could take a cue from, God in that regard if, that's the case.
Well, absolutely. And
can I ask a tangible question?
Sure, man, of course.
I'm just a little bit confused. Okay, so the tree of life, you're saying it's decapitated. Where was it located physically on the Earth plane prior to it being decapitated? The North Pole?
Right. Right. Well, this is where it becomes sort of fractal in nature. We actually live on the back of the same tree, Aristarchus. This is what the dodo bird represents, but that's sort of a different story. Where it's located now is the north center. So where Aristarchus is emanating, everything to us revolves around, in terms of the sky, revolves around Polaris, right? So Polaris is the direct reflection of Aristarchus. So there's a clear relation between the names as well. Polaris, Polaristarchus, right? Aristarchus.
So you're connecting the tree of life, right, with
the picture Nathan has on the screen at the minute, chocolate, and you can see all the lines in the sand. That's the pattern I'm talking about. That's been emanated everywhere. But sorry, continue there. Yeah.
No. So the tree of life, right, and then you said that connects with Mount Meru, right, which is supposed to also be at the north center of the flat plane, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So now, how does that relate? So, because I'm trying to understand. So, how does that relate to the crater on the moon, right? The one you deem as Aristarchus.
Right. So when you look at
that's because I know you always say it's a reflection. So that's the connection I'm trying to make.
So we're looking at the same thing being reflected over and again. So when the direct reflection, again, as I see it, the direct reflection is Polaris, right? So we have Aristarchus emanating from the north center, hitting the barrier. There's a two barrier system here, but hitting the barrier and being projected, and then Polaris. Then we meet Polaris. So Polaris, then everything revolves around Polaris. Polaris does one circle on a nightly basis. So this is the main source that's moving. We observe the direct reflection of Polaris as the sun, right? And then the direct reflection of the sun is the moon. And then everything else is just this reflected expression of the same thing, right? When we look at the moon, then in particular, this is why the moon is our biggest clue giver. Stanley Kubrick told us as much in his movie 2001: A Space Odyssey. When we look at the moon, we have to think in terms of reflected artifacts. So when I looked at the moon two years ago,
and with that, I will say a huge, massive, enormous thank you to all of you who have joined us on the Nathan Oakley premiering stream, for tuning in, hopefully smashing the super chat, liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing. If you need to keep yourself occupied after this stream is over, then go to nathanoakley.com and check out the Flat Earth Debate Forum. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I'll see you all in the next video.
Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!